Alright, we are recording for chapter 8 of... Well, technically it's Wrath of Khan, but it's in there. It's in there. So this does span, actually from them being within the Genesis Cave to the Genesis planet forming. So just, we do get the fight, the battle between the Enterprise and Reliant in here. These chapters are kind of long. I'm not... Well, okay, no. I do have one complaint with their length, and that's, makes it a little more annoying to do these videos. Especially because it's like, I only get like 9-10 videos, and then it's like I'm not going to get to have a break or anything between. Or at least not much of one. Anyhow. So we start with Khan, who is in the storage bay of Reliant. He patted the sleek flank of the great machine, the Genesis torpedo. When he tired of ruling over worlds that existed, he would create new worlds to his own design. Yep. That is Khan's ego. So then we get back to the Genesis Cave, where they've moved around some more comfortable. And David is walking around. Saavik is watching him and just observing, which is kind of what she's been taught to do. But it does also share her consideration of, because he's just found out who his father is. Apparently, Carol had been telling him that his father had died before he was born. Okay. That does help to avoid certain issues. But anyway. But she's thinking about her own reaction. Saavik doubted she would be able to say the same of herself, being able to assimilate the information, the knowledge, as with considerable grace, is how she described David's reaction. It would be an unimaginably dreadful event if anyone ever identified the Vulcan family to which one of her parents had belonged. If that ever happened, if they were somehow forced to acknowledge her, the only way either she or they could survive a meeting with honor and mind intact would be for her to kneel before them and beg their forgiveness for her very existence. It goes on for what her reaction would be to the Romulan, but that line may seem odd. Two things. One, it does get better explained later. I'll read it when we get to that. The other is, and by the way, that is kind of a style in this book that at times it's annoying, but at least it tends to be like within the same chapter. Sometimes I think I've seen it the next chapter, which that's more annoying to me. To not give a full explanation near where it's relevant, but it is a style thing. It is a style thing. At least we do get them. I mean, some stories, they don't give them to you. And I should also acknowledge I might be guilty of that with the Children of Many Gifts. Some of it is because the explanation is technically in failure, because Children of Many Gifts is a sequel. But some is also, well, that person doesn't know. And when we get to a person that does know, it might not be relevant to talk about anymore. Anyway. So continuing with her, and if she ever encountered the Romulan who had caused her to be born, Saavik knew well the depths of violence of which she was capable. If she ever met that creature, she would give herself to the madness willingly. Yeah. And when it gets explained later, that makes more sense. And I also forgot to say, it is not unreasonable to me the idea that Vulcans would still have the concept of face, that, of having to save face. That may seem odd, it may seem illogical, but remember, Vulcan logic is a religion. Okay, I've said this many times before. That is functionally what it is for them. And not everyone fully achieves the principles of their religion. And even on a broad societal level, that will be the case. And also, Vulcans are still emotional beings. They control it, but they do still have that. So the idea of saving face does make a lot of sense. Plus, it's also in the whole thing with logic itself, as if that ever fails with them, they are embarrassed. Think like in Amok Time, when, true, it's Spock who's half and half, but it's still, when he finds out that Kirk is alive, and he goes, Jim! Clearly an emotional outburst. He is embarrassed by that immediately after. So, okay. So then we get to, because she's been looking at him, David notices this and turns and starts looking at her, and it's like, why are you doing that and all that. And there's a little bit of awkwardness, but he then does say something that the reaction seems odd, but it's technically, I mean, it continues the point that gets explained a little bit later, because she does in fact give the explanation to him. So really, the style is still a little odd, having broken up, but it does make sense. The pacing of it does make perfect sense to do. It's just not necessarily what I would do, because it's different from me, but I can't say it's a bad thing. It's just different from me. I bet I know who I'm looking at, he said. Mr. Spock's daughter, right? She spun toward him, her fists clenched at her sides. He flinched back. He thought she was going to belt him, but she straightened up and gradually relaxed her hands. If I thought you knew what you were saying, Saavik told him, I would kill you. So he is completely confused by that reaction. He does also explain, though, that basically I don't think there's that many Vulcans in Starfleet. I figured, you must have been his daughter and was just following in your father's footsteps. It's not unreasonable. It truly isn't. But he doesn't know enough to realize that's not the case. And also, to be fair, there's a lot of Vulcans out there. Why would you think that the second one you're aware of, that you're aware of in Starfleet has to be related to the first you're aware of? It is silly to believe that, but at the same time, it's completely human to do that. It's like, you already know this piece of information. You assume that related pieces of information are nearby and connected. But that's not the case here. In many cases, it's not. Yeah, he does also have a trust a member of Starfleet to react like that. Try to give somebody a compliment, and look what you get. And he, intended as a compliment. She even says, you cannot offer a worse insult to Captain Spock than to imply he is or ever could be my father. But she does eventually explain. Do you know anything about Vulcan sexual physiology? Sure, what difference does that make? They still have to reproduce, even if they only try it every 7 years. David grinned. Sounds pretty boring to me. Which, actually, hang on. One thing that just occurred to me. In Amok Time, it is stated it's very secret. That knowledge is very secret. McCoy doesn't know it, and he's a doctor, okay? And Spock is part of his crew. Technically, he should know that. He should be aware of Pon farr, but isn't. So that's the level of secrecy that is there. But not David is just aware of it as well. To be fair, as I've said many times, I think it's all kind of bullshit. That they're just, kids, it's described this way here in this place, this way in this place, and it's like, yeah, we're just gonna pick and choose between them, what we want and how we want it to be. Anyway, many Romulans find Vulcans sexually attractive. Under normal conditions, a Vulcan would not respond. But the Romulans practice both piracy and abduction, and they have chemical means of forcing prisoners to obey. She paused. David could tell this was difficult for her, but he was fascinated. To lose the control of one's own mind and body, this is the ultimate humiliation, Saavik said. Most Vulcans prefer death to capture by Romulans, and seldom survive if they are driven to act in a way so alien to their natures. The chance that my Vulcan parent even lives is vanishingly small. Oh, David said. Romulans make a great game of their cruelty. A few take the game so far as to father or conceive a child from their coercion, then compel the Vulcan woman to live long enough to bear it, or the Vulcan man to live long enough to witness its birth. That completes the humiliation and confers great social status on the Romulan. Romulans be fucked up. It is also a little odd, though. Confers great social status on the Romulan, but at the same time, the Romulan government has decided that these children do not even exist. Yeah, that actually is a significant problem. Somebody should have caught them and been like, which is it? You need to pick one and choose that. You can't have both here. Yeah. But one thing interesting is because we do have in TNG at least 2 instances of half Romulan children. Now, true, TNG is set like 90 years or so after this. One is related to yesterday's Enterprise, when Tasha Yar, brought back to life, goes back in time on the Enterprise C, captured by Romulans, ultimately has a child by one, a daughter that it always appears full Romulan. I mean, it's like there's nothing to suggest she isn't, aside from it is still Denise Crosby. I was trying to remember the first name. Pretty sure it's Denise Crosby. In that she returned to play. I cannot remember the Romulan name, though. I'm sorry about that. But there's that, and it is in fact at one point the daughter does describe that Tasha had tried to escape with her, but was captured because the baby cried out. The daughter cried out. They were captured, taken back, and her mother was then killed for trying to flee. That kind of sort of aligns with what we're seeing here. And as a little bit of an aside, on the one hand, actually it's very much an aside, on the one hand, it sucks that she felt she needed to leave TNG, that it wasn't working for her, and so that's why Tasha Yar ended up getting killed off. That sucks. But on the other hand, yesterday's Enterprise and her return as the Romulan commander, those are awesome episodes. It's one of those kind of sad things and also by her being removed, that allowed Worf's character to move up. It's one of those sad things where it actually like boosted the series, including her return as different characters. But it's like, yeah, it's one of those sad things. You wish she could have had that be just the great opportunity that it should have been, but what it turned out to be good content for the show. Legitimately, yesterday's Enterprise, and I don't think there's a single one of the Romulan episodes she does that I don't enjoy as well. So, I mean, very good actress as well. Just anyway. The other is it's a 2-parter. It's actually part of a crossover episode with Deep Space Nine. I can't remember the name of it. I might be able to find it, but I don't feel like doing that. Where Worf is told that potentially his father is still alive at a Romulan prison camp. That's not the case. But he does find other Klingons who had been taken from the Kittimer massacre. And some of them in this prison camp with Romulans. And both sides have basically given up their fight with each other. And so you actually have the Romulan commandant, prison commandant, took one of the Klingons as a wife and ended up, they had a daughter together, who's half Klingon, half Romulan, which Worf does recognize is a horrible hybridization because Romulans are seen as dishonorable. And I could also see there being some other reasons as well. With that, yeah, it is her existence touches on offensive to Worf, the proud Klingon, much like what Saavik is describing here, for how Vulcans would view her. Those are some decent episodes, and I also just really like, because one thing Worf accidentally, intentionally, it's kind of a mix. He starts igniting the fires in the second generation of Klingons there, because she was not the only child born there. She's the only one named as specifically stated as being half Romulan, though. But he ends up like taking one of them on a hunt, and it ignites the fires in his Klingon blood. And while coming back, Worf teaches him a little bit more of their traditions, including Klingon song, and that how did it go that a song he always thought of as a lullaby was actually supposed to be a song of victory, that two warriors returning from a victorious battle would sing. And when getting there, because they're in the dining hall, and like he dropped the deer or equivalent, whatever it was that they had eaten, that they had killed, he starts the song going, and you just see all of the Klingons joining in, and it's actually, I really like this thing. I also really like when they've shown Klingon music like that. I do enjoy that. I do, because it just, okay, I know this is quite an aside. I want this to be a short video, but I can't help it because I want to talk about it, and I don't know when else I'd have a good shot at doing so. My headcanon for how Klingon music works, including Klingon opera, is when the composer finishes it, doesn't like go to a hall or anything like that to perform it. No. He just goes out onto the street and starts performing it in front of everyone. Just does that to see their reactions. And I could even potentially see some of it being that maybe he like hands them off or whatever, but like I could believe a chorus starts building, but that just recognizing what is being said, if there is a chorus line in there, and just people joining in as best they can. But just that I do feel that how it is so often presented in TNG, and I think also in Deep Space Nine, I don't remember how much of it is in Deep Space Nine with Klingon music, but that their music is so crucial, so critical, so significant in their culture that you could just come out on the street and start performing it, and people will stop. Klingons will stop what they are doing to witness it, and potentially even join into it if it is something that they know. And it's just, yeah. I think there is at least the rumor, I don't know how true it is, that they had considered after Deep Space Nine doing another spin-off series that was going to be focused on just Klingons with Michael Dorn, Worf. And it's like, man, I wish they had done it. It would have been, well, on the one hand, could have been really, really cool. On the other hand, though, it might not have been well done, so maybe letting it just exist in our heads is best. But it's, yeah, no, there was good potential there. Okay, okay. So now we get to Saavik had gone off on her own a little bit. When coming back, finds that that especially Kirk and Carol are kind of just picnicking there, which is a little funny because Carol actually like puts a flower behind his ear, and he initially stops, but tries to stop her, but not successfully, and he kind of like, no, don't do that. Okay, fine. And then like makes a coronet out of flowers to put on her head. So it's like, yeah, maybe I don't want to be here. But Savik's like, wait, if they wanted to be alone, McCoy and David wouldn't be here. So yeah, I can't approach. And I thought that there was also something in here about Kirk basically motioning for her to come over, that yeah, you're fine. There's also this, because she sees this as a no-win scenario, or rather that they have lost, and that the Enterprise, if it has escaped, either has escaped or has been destroyed by Reliant. That's like that they are just trapped here completely. Admiral Kirk seemed so calm and relaxed. As she neared the group, Saavik unfavorably compared her own reaction to the Kobayashi Maru simulation to Kirk's composure in the face of real death or permanent exile. That she was so frustrated and he's here relaxed. Now, of course, he's got a plan that no one else knows about, but still. We then get a line here. That's why they call it a meal, Kirk said, because they had been enjoying the foods. This is like the Garden of Eden, Dr. McCoy said with wonder. Only here every apple comes from the tree of knowledge, Dr. Marcus said, then added, with all the risk that implies. Most likely this is Carol talking, by the way, of the Doctor's Marcus, because David was described as like lying on the hill side a little bit further away with Kirk and Carol like at the top of the hill and McCoy standing nearby, like leaning on a tree kind of thing. So those three are together. David's a little bit further off. But I do like that line, though. I think that that's a pretty good line. Because maybe she hadn't thought of it before, but Howard pointed out with some of the stuff, how David is like, oh no, we can't let this thing be used as a weapon. But it's like, the nature of the Genesis device is a weapon. It is destruction. It just happens to create something useful at the end, as McCoy had pointed out. So Carol, perhaps because Genesis has now been taken away from them, and that they can actually reflect on the consequences of its existence, maybe that is part of the reason that she's saying that. You know, just recognize that, yeah, we have learned good and evil here, and this is not a good thing. But anyway, finally, Saavik is going to ask Kirk about it. And also he thought, what did you do on the test? I would very much like to know. Why, Lieutenant, you're looking at the only Starfleet cadet ever to beat the simulation. I almost got myself foot tossed out of the academy too, Jim said. Thought about the time, took out his glasses, and looked at his chronometer again. Not quite. Okay, just the set there. How did you beat it? I reprogrammed the simulation so I could save the ship. What? Jim felt rather amused to have startled Saavik so thoroughly. I would too. I changed the conditions of the test, he smiled. He was not a wizard computer programmer himself. Fortunately, one of his academy classmates not only was, but could never resist a challenge. It was Jim, though, who had staged the commando raid, or cat burglary, since no one figured out what he had done till quite a while later, on the supposedly secure storage facility where the simulation programs were kept, in order to substitute his version for Starfleet's. The instructor couldn't decide whether to die laughing or blow her stack. I think she finally flipped a coin. I received a commendation for original thinking. With a smile, he shrugged. I don't like to lose. Then you evaded the purpose of the simulation. You never faced death. Well, I took the test twice before I decided to do something about it, so I suppose you could say I faced death. I just never had to accept it. Until now, Saavik, we each face death every day we're alive. I like the movie version better. Just because of the whole David calling out, he cheated. It's like, modified the conditions of the test. Because I got that video that I did a while ago talking about how in Star Trek 2009, the way they depict it there, he is absolutely and totally dismissive of the test. And it's like, that's not Jim Kirk. He would not be. Like, he modified the conditions of the test. He didn't make it where he would just win. He made it possible to win, is how... Yeah, I reprogrammed the simulation so I could save the ship, not so I would save the ship, okay? It's like that I do appreciate, that difference there. And because that is part of his character. He doesn't like to lose, but Kirk is also somebody who, yes, I don't like to lose, but if winning is trivial, he doesn't like that either. Okay, so... Yeah, and it's also like how earlier, in theory, why couldn't he have taken control of Reliant via the prefix codes and then just change the prefix codes somehow that Khan would never know? Or do something else that would give him a permanent advantage? He didn't. Maybe that's something not technically possible. Maybe it's just we don't want the story to end just yet. Although when you think about it, it wouldn't be unreasonable, the idea of Khan has so damaged the Enterprise that their transporters are out and they can't get boarded. They can't get on board the ship. But they take control of it and are just causing it to follow them to Space Lab. They're trying to figure out what all is going on. Khan retakes Reliant. He takes the computers back somehow. So you could still actually have the fight continue. Have it all play out similarly. Though how you would then manage for Reliant and Enterprise to break apart and then have to come back together for the confrontation we do get in this chapter, that might be a little more difficult. Though it could be something as simple as Khan regains control, but only partial. and he can't deliver a fatal blow to the Enterprise. The Enterprise fires back, and now they're both kind of disabled, but enough that they can separate. And Reliant is basically now Khan's again. So I could see a way to do that, but anyhow. I just want to check. Okay. I will also say, though, I do appreciate that it's like he had to break into the lab, or break into somewhere to change it out, which is more so probably the commendation for original thinking kind of aspect to it, where it's not like he just reprogrammed it remotely. It's a no, he had to go through this whole thing to change the situation so he could do that. So it's the test, instead of being in the normal simulation room, he basically just viewed as he expanded it to be larger to include the simulation setup itself. Then yeah, it does make a bit more sense. As a, yeah, we're not gonna kick your ass out of here, you deserve it. But if we view it this way, then it's like, well, no, you actually are showing a command philosophy that is desirable. Anyway, so now he's been checking his chronometer, because it's basically he knows in, I don't remember how long, that Spock is basically not going to return any transmissions until this point in time. So he's checking his chronometer, his watch, and then it's like, okay, it's time. You there? They get beamed up. By the book, Savick said, Regulation 46A, during battle, no, because Kirk was answering that, no uncoded messages on open channel, Savick said, and then to Spock, it seems very clear, it seems very near a lie. Sorry. It was a code, Lieutenant, he said. Unfortunately, the code required some exaggeration of the truth. She did not answer. He knew she was troubled by the difference between a lie and a figurative interpretation of reality. He knew precisely how she felt. It had taken him a long time to understand that in some cases no objective difference existed, and that any explanation lay completely within circumstances. We do get an answer to one thing that I do greatly appreciate, and okay. So I'm going to read through, I've got 3 highlights here. They're basically all related to one thing except for one. But our scanners are undependable at best, Spock said. Space Lab's scanners, however, are fully operational. They are transmitting the position of Reliant. Okay, so that's one highlight. Second highlight, Reliant can outrun and outgun us. Okay, Spock said calmly. There is, however, the McIntyre Nebula. Now, we're highlight 3. Admiral, Savick said, within the nebula, the gas clouds will interfere with our tacticals. Visual will not function. In addition, ionization will disrupt our shields. Kirk glanced over the rim of his spectacles at Savick, then at Spock. Spock raised one eyebrow. Precisely, Lieutenant. The odds will then be even. Yeah, let's tackle the Reliant can both outrun and outgun us. There is a little bit of the setup there that, and with the engines in the shape they're in, they could not stay hidden for long, so there's a little bit there. But it is, as I said previously, my sense of that line in the movie, because I never really had a good grasp of how much damage was actually to either ship. That's just a weakness of the movies typically. Well, of movies typically, that you can't spend a lot of time describing everything in detail like you can in a book. So to me, I always interpret that as Reliant is a more advanced ship than the Enterprise. But also reasonable because it was a wildly different design that I'd never seen before. So, but no, it's a little clearer here that no, it is just that's how badly damaged the Enterprise is. Alright, but our scanners are undependable at best. Space Lab scanners, however, are fully operational. They are transmitting the position of Reliant. This I like, because it is a plot hole in the movie that how is it that they're able, Enterprise is here and Reliant is here, and you're able to track both? How is the Enterprise able to see that Reliant can't? That's why, because they connected to Space Lab, and Space Lab is transmitting the information, which is true. Why is the transmission able to go through the planet? It's still, maybe it is bouncing it off something. Maybe there is just some setup there. Or that's true. It could also be like a subspace transmission, which in theory would be able to pass through solid materials. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know, but at least that it's okay, you're going to a different technology than just sensors that cannot pass through a planet. That makes sense. But it's like, okay, thank you. That's answered. Cool. But it is also one of those things where it's Saavik wouldn't have thought of that. She doesn't have the experience to think beyond the resources immediately around her, which is the Enterprise. But Spock, this is something that Kirk would think of. Spock, he has the experience of being with Kirk for so many years that I could see it being even Spock would be like, yeah, I did it, but it's a Kirk thing. And then the whole nebula aspect as well. That's, again, Saavik doesn't understand. Why would you do that? It harms our local resources. It harms the ship. We lose these things. But it's like, yes, they lose it as well, though, because she's thinking about what she has, not what she immediately has, not what she does actually have access to as a whole. That's also part of how I've been saying Kirk competes with the no-win scenario. He tries to defeat it. She tries to reject it, but the problem with the rejection is it's a personal thing. It's like, no, that's not what it is. I'm going to keep fighting. Kirk is like, I know what it is. I'm just going to play the game differently. So, yeah. Yeah. Admiral Saavik asked, what happens if Reliant fails to follow us into the nebula? Kirk laughed, though with very little humor. That's the least of our worries. Khan will follow us. Remind me, Lieutenant Spock said, to discuss with you the human ego. It's like, yeah. It's like Khan is very predictable. I just want to... Okay. The line here, James Cook when hailing Reliant, because they actually waited until Reliant could see them to then engage full impulse to go to the nebula, to make sure that they would follow. Because Reliant is like, well, Khan is like, yes, I must destroy the Enterprise. But is this? Yes, this is. They're entering the nebula, and Reliant slows down because Joachim is piloting and is like, dude, it'll knock out some of our systems. We don't want to go in there. So that's when Kirk gets on the horn. James Kirk began to laugh. Superior intellect, he said with contempt. You're a fool, Khan. A brutal, murderous, ridiculous fool. The line in the movie is better. It's like, Khan, I'm laughing at your superior intellect. Or I know it's something very akin to that, but that's much sharper, I feel, than this. Well, yeah, that is true. We do get we tried your way, Khan. Are you game for a rematch? But then we get I'm laughing at your superior intellect. That's a much better line than what's written here. And then, Joachim does try to actually stop Khan. Khan's response is to hurl him, to strike him and sends him flying. Which leads us to this then. Joachim returned to his place at the helm, bewildered into silence. In all the years that he had served his lord, all the times of witnessing the violence to which Khan was prone, Joachim had never himself been subjected to that wrath. Khan had never assaulted him until now. Joachim had been in fights aplenty. He had even, in his younger days, lost a few. None had ever affected him like the single blow from Khan. His hands shook on the controls, partly from humiliation and partly from rage. He had sworn to follow Khan even to death. There was no room for compromise. He had put no conditions on his vow. No conditions for madness, no conditions for betrayal. Freedom was in Khan's grasp, yet he was throwing it away. Joachim indeed felt betrayed. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, it's... He will remain loyal to Khan here, but he is hating that. He really is, because it's... He wants Khan redeemed because he loves Khan. He wants to be there to help Khan be redeemed because he loves Khan. But he also is recognizing the pain Khan is causing. So it is very hard for him. Alright, okay. So one of the times they that's... no, it has to be later. I'm just... Well, it has to be. Okay, so just like the Nebula is also in the Kobayashi Maru test for Savick, where the whole things will be disrupted, we also do have Sulu. When one of the shots hits the Enterprise, Sulu's station explodes and burns him, electrocutes him, sends him flying. When Mr. Sulu fell, Savick leaped to the helm, seeking out which operations still functioned and which had crashed. It even describes Savick's hands were an extension of the controls. Her body was part of the ship itself. Hence also, Kirk orders her to fire. She does fire. Strikes through Alliance main hull, and this actually is what causes the damage that that we see in the movie and kills, well, lethally harms Joachim. He's not dead just yet. Khan could feel the life ebbing from his friend. For a moment he experienced despair. His sight blurred. He tried to force away the tears, but they spilled unchecked down his face. This was what his hatred had bought. James Kirk would repay the price. I shall avenge you, Kern said to Joachim, his voice a growl. I wished no revenge. Kirk laid his friend down carefully. He stood up, his fists clenched at his side. I shall avenge you. So even here, when we get the line, this is what his hatred had bought, Joachim saying he doesn't want revenge. It's still all Khan can do. Just like I had said earlier with how it was stated that his wife, McGivers, didn't want him to go on a quest for revenge. She didn't want that, but it's what he knows. She could mollify him, I assume, but once she was gone, he can't recognize the loss and try to change and be the person he was with her. No, he's leaving that and becoming who he was before. And he's doing the exact same thing here, rather continuing to be the person he has been, which is a hateful person, a rageful person. He just needs to do this. He's not the only hateful person in this, but we'll get to that a little later. So David, he's feeling useless. McCoy had enlisted him and Carol to help in sickbay. But he felt out of place there, and he felt he needed to do something, so he went up to the bridge. Well, he's still largely useless, but he's staying there watching. He also helped carry Chekhov there. And Chekhov's a bit more impressive in the book than in the movie. Anyway, David's up there, and Sulu is injured here. He was not a medical doctor. He knew some first aid, which he had never had to use. And basically, he starts giving him CPR. And he even talks about the whole 4 breaths into him, and then a breath, 15 compressions. No reaction, a breath, 15 compressions, and he just keeps doing this. And it has been 9 years or so since I went through some CPR training. And fortunately, I've never had to actually try it on a person. And certainly the training would not have lasted this long. But I can definitely believe that Vonda, yes, when writing this, either had personal experience or knew people that have done CPR for a length of time, because of how it describes the strain and pain on him, David, to do this. But it works, ultimately, sort of. Sulu is non-responsive. No heartbeat, no breathing. David keeps us going until medics arrive. He keeps going. The medic checks this and is like, okay, epinephrine shot to the heart, and that actually works. That gets him going, and is the medic also recognizes that David saved Sulu's life. I mean, yes, she's the one who actually. The medic is the one. I don't know why I necessarily said she, because I don't believe it was ever stated. Maybe it was. Regardless, yeah, she did that final act. But if David hadn't been doing the CPR, Sulu would have died. And this is somewhat important later. Oh, hang on. Let me highlight this. So yeah, Chekhov is a lot more impressive in this. It's because he's still suffering from the effects of the eel. So he has a ruptured eardrum. The way McCoy described the damage is he had a concussion, a very severe concussion. That's what he would need. That's how he would need to recover, as though he had a concussion. But fortunately, there was no true brain damage, no cell death from the eel being in there. And initially, he's like, I gotta help. In part because he feels it's his fault. But McCoy's like, nope, you need to stay here. And it's also, well, McCoy's even like, look, you either lie down on your own accord or a tranquilizer. But it's also, Chekhov even trying to get up, it's like, ugh. And McCoy then straps him down. Not to prevent him from leaving, but because they are in battle, and so he might get thrown around. Well, Chekhov wakes up again, sees what's going on there, and it's like, all right, yeah, not getting it. But then he sees Sulu brought in, and it's like, I'm needed. So he manages to work his way out of the restraints, gets up, no one's paying good enough attention, gets over to the door, and David is there, and is basically like, you better lie down again. I can't. I must get to the bridge. Mr. Sulu, hey, look. I'm not sure about some of the Russian here, but basically, help me, Bojamoy. The ship has nothing but children on its crew. So Chekhov is aware, and David does help him. And the way it's described, I'm not sure if I can find a line there, but basically, even with David's help, Chekhov is barely walking. That's how badly injured he still is. But he has such a drive to still help, to do something. Especially with Sulu down, it's like, no, they need me. And it's only children. It's only cadets. They really need me. Gets to the turbo lift. And he actually pushes off from David at that point. And fortunately, David doesn't come in. But Chekhov does have a note in here basically explaining that if Kirk sees me getting off the turbo lift with help, he's just going to tell me to go right back to sickbay. I need to be able to walk off the turbo lift. That's the only way he will let me stay and do something. Sir, could you use another hand? Kirk glanced at him, startled, then he smiled. Take your place at weapons console, Mr. Chekhov. Thank you, sir. And he goes. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, it's like that's a hell of a lot more impressive. What Chekhov is doing there than just... Because in the movie, it always seemed like, he just showed up. It also... I'm just trying to think, because I do kind of want to step back and like actually be critical of the story. And it is only positive criticism that I have there, because it does very well set up how he is... It's not like he's lost an arm or has a broken arm, something like that, and is still going to help. It's not quite like that, but it still is it does a very good job of describing how he feels the need for him, and he does the need for him to be there, but also his sense of duty, that he feels that this is partly his fault, so he must get there. He must do this. Okay, we get the line about the whole Spock pointing out that Khan, though very intelligent, lacks experience. He's only moving in a single plane. So the whole, okay, going down. There's something else I want to mention with that, but get to that in a little moment. So Enterprise stops, just goes down and waits for the line to go overhead. So while it's calm here, David is back on the bridge. Kirk glanced around the bridge and saw that David had returned. He gestured to him. The young man came down the stairs and stopped beside the captain's seat. "How's Sulu?" "They don't know yet," David said. "His hands are a mess. He'll be in therapy for a while. If he lives, they wouldn't say. He might have brain damage." "You got to him fast," Jim said. "He'd be dead if you hadn't. You gave him the one chance he had. Whatever happens, David, I'm proud of you." To Jim's surprise and shock, David reacted with a curse. "What the hell right have you got to be proud of me?" he said angrily. He stormed back to the upper level of the bridge and started scowling with his arms folded across his chest. He ignored Jim Kirk's gaze. Jim turned back to the view screen, angry and hurt. So, as I said, Khan's not the only character filled with hatred in this. David is as well, because even without Kirk being his father, it still is you're a civilian, okay? You're just here, but you just saved my man's life, okay? You just saved one of my most trusted bridge officers' lives, because you just jumped in and did what you knew to do, what you knew you needed to do. That's something to be proud of. If it were Saavik doing it as well, he would be proud of her. It's her doing her duty, yes. David is doing more, but it still can be proud of that. So, David is just that still hateful, filled with hate towards Kirk. He can't even accept the statement that doesn't have to be a father saying something to his son. So, yeah. But next, we get this. Because they're down and it's like, okay, now it's time. Reliance should have gone over. Lieutenant Saavik, "Aye, sir." He'd been tempted to say "dive, dive, dive" earlier, but refrained. Now he kept himself from ordering the young Vulcan officer to let this ship surface. This was not, after all, a submarine. They were not hunting an enemy U-boat. Too many old novels, Jim, he thought. Or old and very good movies. Runs on Run Deep. Such a good movie. And it's definitely one that inspired this fight, this battle, but also in Balance of Terror. I'm not sure if there are others that are directly attributed to it, to Run Silent Run Deep, but I do know Run Silent Run Deep is specifically named by a lot of people as the influence. And it's not going to be the only one. There's going to be plenty of other films, but yeah, Run Silent Run Deep, I definitely recommend viewing it if you can. Let me quickly look, because this will be faster for me to find than that one episode of TNG. Okay, just need to look it up on IMDb. Is it streaming anyway? It is on Prime Video, Pluto TV, Roku, and Tubi at the moment. All those may change at some point. And there's also Rent By. So this is just streaming, so you do have multiple options where you can watch it. I do strongly recommend it. It is a very good film. I would also even recommend just buying it, because it's like that. The copy I have is from Kino, and it's a very good film. It's very easy for me to recommend. And now let me start checking in this. Okay. A couple more things. Okay, yeah. Actually, a few more than that. Okay, so Spock deciding he needs to go and repair the engines because main power won't be ready for another 6 minutes at the earliest, but the Genesis wave is going to go off in 4 minutes. Spock permitted himself a moment of pride. Saavik would make a fine officer. She would fulfill the potential he had detected in the filthy, barbarous, half-breed Helgard child. He wished he would be able to guide her a little further. But this way she would be freer to find her own path. I will get to it. It's in a little bit more. But the description of his working on the engines It's a lot more intense than what is shown in the movie. Yeah. But anyway, so Khan, he's gotten hit again. The Reliant has gotten hit again. So he is like one arm. In the movie, you see him like this, but it's like no. His arm is shattered such that he just shoves it into his belt, so it's not flopping around, getting in his way. He goes down to the storage area, activates the Genesis device, and then heads back to the bridge because he's like, I'm not dying here. Joachim's body lay only an arm's length from him. His wife's body, dust, lay half a light year distant. No, it isn't. Soon, neither space nor time would have any meaning, and he would join his love and his friend. He crawled to Joachim, reached out, and touched his rigid hand. Darkness enclosed his spirit. That is saying he died then, just to be clear, because that's how death has been described previously. But half a light year distant. No. Half a light year away would mean it would be in the same solar system. So, yeah, it's... even half a parsec would be more reasonable, and only 2 light years away, but then Reliant would have been there very freaking fast. So no, it has to be much further away than that. So, I mean, that's just one of those technical things that, yeah, I'm gonna notice, gonna be bothered by. Anyway, when the Genesis wave began, it would spread until it reached hard vacuum, engulfing and degrading every atom of matter within the Mutara Nebula, gas or solid, living or dead. So that explains a little bit with what the Genesis wave is going to do, but I also have a significant disagreement with it, because the idea just goes to a hard vacuum is a poor idea, because, well, for one thing, how did they apply it then within the body of the Regulus planet? You know, within Regulus 1, how do they limit it to that and not going further? Clearly, it can be controlled, and even if you want to be like, oh, well, the torpedo can manage it, well, hold on, well, that the torpedo would just go on indefinitely. It's like, but it's still say you have to program the matrix. You have to program what it's supposed to create. I would assume that you program that, it's like, okay, that takes this much mass. It achieves this much mass. It stops. It doesn't just go until it runs out of mass. Because what's it going to do with the extra? Or is it procedurally generated? Maybe. But then you also have a problem there of, well, it was programmed for a planet. It wasn't programmed to do a solar system. A nebula is freaking big. It mentions there being a pulsar at the center. I have a feeling that's just jargon being thrown in, and we shouldn't actually take it as that. But I mean, a lot of nebulas are like hundreds of solar masses or more. That'll be a big ass plan. I mean, that won't be a big ass plan. That'll be big, and it'll just collapse down and probably form itself into something like a gas giant. I mean, it's not going to work. Or into a star. It's no. So anyway, Spock gets down there. Gets down to engineering. We don't have the remember line because that was based on what was said in the introduction. Basically a on-set decision. So the novelization, without going back and editing it, that may have already been significantly written up, or at least progressed down the pipeline, that you can't make that change. It doesn't have it. You can't go in there, Spock. Spock smiled at Dr. McCoy. He was so completely and comfortingly predictable. Spock could go through their conversation in his mind and know everything the doctor would say, everything he himself would reply. The result was the same. I regret there is no time for logical argument, Doctor, he said. I've enjoyed our conversations in the past. With that peculiar human atavistic instinct for danger, McCoy drew back, knowing what he planned. But Spock was too quick for him. His fingers found the nerve in the junction of McCoy's neck and shoulder. He exerted pressure. McCoy's eyes rolled back, and he collapsed. Spock caught him and lowered him gently to the deck. You've been a worthy opponent and friend, he said. Yeah, Spock being so respectful like that of McCoy. Approve. We also get, he accepted the regrets. So this is, he's already in there. He's been being exposed to it, to the radiation. We even get some stuff here about He recalled the events in his life that had given him intellectual and even, he could admit it now, and who was to despise him, emotional pleasure. He accepted the regrets of his life, the expectations he had never been able to fulfill, neither Vulcan nor human. He was unable to satisfy either part of his heritage. Perhaps his uniqueness compensated in some small way. He tried to convey that possibility to Savick, who must face and overcome the same trials. So as it goes on, for what he experiences, it's there wasn't a mention about Vulcan's strength in this, but even with his very disciplined mind, it does describe how his body starts actively fighting him. He can't actually suppress the pain fully. As he's trying to realign the rods in there and then ultimately grab the wheel and turn it to activate the main engines. And it's like he can feel the damage being done to his body. He is bleeding in many places. Like at one point he wipes his brow off and his sleeve just is covered in a dark blood. As he's trying to turn that wheel that I just mentioned, his hands are almost slipping because of how much blood is on it. And also that he can like feel the cells of his body degrading even. I mean, it's much more intense than you see in the movie where he's just like, doing that even with the gloves on. Whereas here, there's no indication he's got gloves on. But I mean, you can see there's some extra makeup applied to Leonard Nimoy's face at the end of that to show that he has been harmed, and I think there might even be a little bit on his hands, but I think it may have said in here that his hands are being blackened by it. It's a lot more intense. So yeah, I'm good with that though. That's one of the advantages to the book, is to writing in a book. You can describe things that you wouldn't have depicted in a movie, because in a movie it's like we don't want that high rating. Let's tone it down. Or just for practical reasons, it's like, yeah, we can't really show that kind of harm on somebody effectively. Like, that would take too long in makeup. Or just we don't have the makeup to do it, so, yeah. Yeah, good chapter. I'm just thinking that some of the other chapters I've read recently, like, even the last one, I want to say I liked more than this. But yeah, so it does end with them escaping. And then Kirk being told he got to come down here because he's like, Scotty, good job. And then eventually he's like, where's Spock? And it's Savick, who actually, without turning, just like kind of slumps because she realizes he's in engineering. She saw him leave. Or just knows that's where he went. And then McCoy comes over, Jim, you got to get down here. Hurry. That's when Kirk leaves. But it's interesting because Savick doesn't. Well, Kirk even says, Savick, you have the con. And it's like, that's in some ways a little mean because she should also want to be there. Especially when you consider she wasn't able to be there for Peter, and Spock would be the next closest person to her. Well, actually, he would have been closer to her than Peter was. So, yeah, her not being able to be there, Kirk, that might be a little mean. But I can't understand the whole who else. It's like Savick has actually been trained. We know she's been trained to captain the ship. Uhura and Chekhov should also be qualified, at least by rank. I'm not sure if they necessarily have command training. Well, no, Chekhov would have to have been because he was first officer on Alliant. But Kirk may be aware he's not in good shape. Also, he's just here out of convenience, not assigned to the ship. So that'd leave Uhura to take command. And I'm not sure. That is one of the things that's neat about the canon of the original series. She was in the chain of command. So if sufficient people ahead of her were incapacitated, she would be in command of the Enterprise. There were a number of people ahead of her, yes, but still, that was the case. But I don't know if she is fully a command officer, that she, like Kirk saying that to her, giving her command of the con would make sense when Savick is there. I could see Savick is actually, despite the lack of experience, despite the lower rank, is the one that would be next in the chain of command. as far as training goes. So, don't know. I wanted it to be short. Oh well. See you next time.